family has been here for a long time. The main farm 1799 and this particular field where we are now around 100 years later. And we knew of the name for the field being Kilmocholmóg. So yeah, we've just been farming here, following on in the family tradition. Our first dig was in 2022. That summer we had 1 week. The archaeological team came and conducted that community dig, and we're very excited by what they found. So we were able to secure funding then for a following year, and we had a 3-week project then in 2023, and the present one is also a 3-week project. So we've had people from all ages, all walks of life. For some it's been a tick on the bucket list. Other younger folk, obviously it's a new experience for most of them, but it's like having a whole big family. It's been a great builder of relationships. So to me, that's the real treasure. I mean, people say, did you find any treasure? But that's the treasure that has come out of it. It's been a fantastic experience. Well, just to help anybody who has come along to either volunteer or visit the site, I had put together an album. It's still a work in progress now. Just to show some of the background, how our project got started and why. I have maps in it. I have Ordnance Survey and Brownlow, papers from Brownlow maps. Just a little bit about the initial surveys that were done by Dr. Alistair Ruffle from Queen's and his team. We have drone survey maps, and that's Ryan Montgomery was a drone operator. And between all these different surveys, they were able to target areas of particular interest and to have the trenches plotted for that first year. Pictures of the finds trays, for example, with a nice big tooth, and then you can get flints, sometimes they're worked flints that have been, napped and used as tools, and that means that gives you evidence that people have been on this site for thousands of years, not just perhaps 1,000, but to find out there's been people on this land for thousands and thousands of years. It's just astonishing. It really is. And Poppy, this is Poppy, I have to show you Poppy, yes. She's the archaeology dog with lots of adoring fans. Everybody loves Poppy. And our patron saint, as I call him, Frank McCarry himself, who's been involved with this right back 60 years. When he first heard of the relationship here to potential archaeology, because there is an oral tradition which is still maintained that there was a graveyard in this field, and when you have the kill aspect of the Kilmocholmóg name, that marries in with the church, which we are now very convinced, yes, absolutely existed here.
Well, in helping my brothers in their family business, I was delivering parcels to Finola's mummy and dad when Finola and Ursula were small children. And this particular Saturday morning, a morning like this morning actually, nice and bright, the dad came to the door rather than the mum. And he knew that I had an interest in local area because we had a small farm in the Bolian. We were interested in the place name of the Bolian, all those things. And generally speaking, we liked people and we liked the countryside. And he talked to me about, he had a digger, and he had uncovered, in trying to shore the ground, to drain the ground, he had uncovered some human remains. And he took that very seriously. And he said to me, it was in the field called Kilmocholmóg. And I said, just say that again, Miss McConville. He says the field was called Kilmocholmóg. Now, I was sufficiently aware of the countryside that fields had names, but this was an unusual name. And I recorded it when I went home. And I started to try and get the derivation, because I'm interested in derivation of place names. And then it turned out that the Kilmocholmóg meant the church of my dear friend Colman. There's an ancient road coming from Slane in Meath up to Dunsaverick in North Antrim called the Slane Maluchra, and that would have been the same as the A1, a rail transport link. and people coming up from Slane wanting to get across to Lough Neagh, which was the focus of all transport for armies, for merchants, for all people. Lough Neagh would have branched off at Trummery to come towards Lough Neagh. And I reckon that this is part here, that where we are, this is part of, I'll call it a trail rather than a pilgrim path. By calling it a pilgrim path, I might mislead people, but it certainly was part of a trail from Trummery to Lough Neagh. And you look west all the time, and you're looking towards Machrelin, which was the cradle of Christianity in Ulster. That's what the documents say. And then you come across Ahagallon and Ahalee, and then you come across here, Kilmocholmóg, and not far away, you've Knockadoney. This is part of a Christian trail that comes from people who would use the Slí Malúchra to get to Lough Neagh. As regards here, what the archaeologists and you, David Weir, have done here, and Fionnuala Mulholland or Fionnuala McConville has done here, that's majestic. That's majestic. To bring, and you particularly have engendered a culture here of people looking to the past and valuing it for a change, valuing our past.
So People First is it's a post-16 training provider. We're based in Lurgan, Portadown, and a couple of different places around. We offer different vocational subjects for students who finish their GCSEs and want to go on to have a career. So we give them the opportunity to come work in a smaller environment, and that's usually the basis of how they kind of flourish. And it's something that's just a bit more relaxed environment for them, and usually it brings out the best in them. We're here, our students have been given an opportunity to come down and help with the community dig. We were down 2 years ago and the students loved it. The benefits of it are giving the students a bit of an awareness that they didn't have before, giving them an appreciation about the history of the local area, getting them out and involved in something outside of a classroom environment. It's a great opportunity to get them out in the fresh air, to get them, just thinking about something that's a bit different than what they usually think of. On site, they've been doing a lot of trial work. We've opened up a new trench. There's been a lot of smaller wee discoveries that have been made, which have been very interesting. Pottery, there's been iron slag, there's been glassware, there's been just lots of things, but there's always the next thing to be discovered.
This will be my third year at the dig. I started off for 1 week and I graduated to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and now I'm here for 3 weeks as well. So I'm one of the longest volunteers here. Archaeology has been in my blood since I was a little girl. I have been fascinated with history and I read a lot. I watch a lot of documentaries, and this is just a fantastic way to work at all that, so it is, and to actually get into the ground and see what's there. I've learned how to dig ditches, dig trenches. I've learned about geology. I've learned about stratigraphy. I've learned about the makeup of the soils, the different layers. I've learned a lot of patience too, and I've seen a lot of degraded stone, which I thought was something and is not. I've also learned about pottery, and I've just picked this all up as I've went along by watching and learning from the experts. The schools have been fantastic. I would help out with the schools here in the mornings and the afternoons, seeing how engaged they are and seeing how interested they are, asking questions, answering questions for them, and hopefully making little archaeologists of the future.
So here today, I'm down helping the community out. We've got a ditch over there that I'm helping dig out, hoping to find the base. We've got the sides established at the very least. Hopefully by the end of the day we'll get down so tomorrow it can be photographed and recorded, but time will tell. It's still going. Unfortunately at the moment it is still going, but we'll see. So I first started actually on the first dig. I was here for, I think it was the final few days back in 2022. That was my first exposure, not just to the Kilmocholmóg field, but to NAC and everything else. And I've been back ever since. They can't quite get rid of me. I would love to go in to archaeology, and I'm very thankful to NAC to allow me to work with them for the summer, so I am, and that's the plan at the very least. What I've always loved about archaeology is that when you go to a museum, you see it and it always looks lovely, but I don't think there's anything better than laying eyes on a piece of pottery that maybe somebody hasn't seen in hundreds of years, or a struck piece of flint that was last used 6,000 years ago. You don't quite get that in a museum like you get it out here.
We were here a year and a half ago when they were first on site here. So we've done resistivity surveying, and we've also done drone surveying, which the drone surveying was the one that was key about finding the outer circle of the enclosure here. Today we're just doing some resistivity today, which is measuring moisture content of the ground, which shows up underneath the ground without having to dig it. If there was a feature like a ditch or a wall underneath the ground. So we've been doing some areas here that we hadn't done before. On a site like this, where we know we've got a circular ditch around the edge of this enclosure, it would show up that very clearly, because the ditch retains moisture even under the ground. The remains of the ditch will retain moisture. The other thing it would show up here, if there were walls going across the site, it would also show up dry areas under the soil, which would be a wall, or could be a building, but it might just be a wall.
I'm Mario Fusco. I'm one of the archaeologists from Northern Archaeological Consultancy, and I'm the company metallurgist. And this site, Kilmocholmóg, is particularly interesting for the large amounts of metalworking we found on site. Now, regarding metalworking, everyone always thinks things like, gold ingots. They think things like swords, spears, armor. It's not always as dramatic as that. Usually we end up with things like, we've had quite a lot on this site. We've had things like iron nails. We've had an ingot mold. So we've had an iron knife. But what's really interesting to me is that on this particular site we have large amounts of iron slag. Now, iron slag is the byproduct of iron creation. The interesting thing about the slag on this site is that we're getting such large amounts of it. So we are mostly from a large central refuse pit, and that we know from the early medieval period, where you have large amounts of industry, you also have ecclesiastical activity. So if you imagine, early medieval Ireland doesn't actually have any urban centres. So by definition, your urban and your industrial centres end up being your monasteries and your church sites. So therefore, a large amount of your metalworking, both low status and high status, occurs on your church sites. And Kilmocholmóg is very interesting because the sheer amount of production which has occurred here, we've taken off a few dozen at this point kilograms of iron slag, and the site has produced two very distinct types. This here is we would call it a hearth cake, but this hearth cake here is particularly thick. This is from a primary production furnace. Primary production involves the refining of iron slag. It involves the refining of iron ore and bog iron into things such as ingots and blooms. When you're refining iron into ingots and blooms, you'll produce much more waste iron as iron runs out of the ore, runs out of the bog iron, and produces these large, thick hearth cakes. The main difference between primary and secondary working hearth cakes is in fact the thickness of the hearth cake. For example, this hearth cake here measures over 5 centimetres. 5 centimetres indicates primary production. Primary production is particularly important because 50% of all early medieval sites produce iron slag, but only close to about 1 or 2% actually produce the primary production slag, which we were getting here. So we know this is a large industrial centre to an extent, where they're producing large amounts of both raw iron and worked iron tools. The raw iron blooms and iron ingots are useful trade commodity. So they are, and it stands to reason those 50% of other sites are then acquiring their iron ore, their iron blooms from sites like this. And then we also have these, which are secondary working hearth cakes. Secondary working involves anything from the production of knives to spearheads to nails to door hinges, anything sort of domestic or even martial. You are producing much smaller hearth cakes like this. This has been the primary type we've had on this site. We've had somewhere north of about 160 of these particular types, and they vary between under 5 centimetres to about half a centimetre in size. So that's a particularly bulky one, and here's a particularly small one. But that is all the indication of secondary working.
So we're here to find the lost church that through folklore and oral tradition it was always talked about here. Kilmocholmóg itself means the church of my little Colman, and we're very lucky this year to have found the church itself through the archaeology that we've been digging here for the last 3 weeks. We had a year off, so we did, and through that year we were able to do more geophysical survey, and we did a drone survey as well, and through that we were able to show where the enclosure ditch of where the church would have been inside, and now we've actually found it and able to dig it within the trenches. So it's been an amazing year to be able to actually find that enclosure ditch, and it's about 1.5 meters deep, so it's definitely a big structure around this church. Not only that, we've also got evidence of structures within the interior, which obviously itself leads to the fact that there's definitely something going on here. The early medieval period starts about between 400 and 600 AD. The pottery and things that we're getting here out of Kilmocholmóg would put the date about 600 AD roughly. We think they would have come here because if you look at the landscape that we have around here, we think there probably was a lake down this direction, which would have been a natural defence for itself. And as you come round the enclosure, it gets deeper, and we think then obviously they're defending it at that stage by doing that. And if you look at the landscape, it's lovely here. It's a nice rise. You would be protected here from predators, animals and people, so it would have been a really good place to have a church. So we'll take all the archaeological artefacts and everything back to our offices. They'll all be analysed by our pottery specialists, flint, metalworking as well. We have a lot of evidence of metalworking, so all that will be looked at as well. And then we're able to put together what is the story of Kilmocholmóg. This year we were able to also ascertain that we have Neolithic occupation here through structures and loads of Neolithic pottery, which was definitely a bit of a turn in what we thought we were going to get, but it does show that people were here well even before the church, showing that this landscape was perfect for many people, but Neolithic people would have been here about 6,000 years ago. And then we have the change into the early medieval period and the church here, and then also we have got evidence of medieval occupation. So this was a very, very long-lived site, which is incredible for a field and just outside Lurgan.
We're just here at Kilmocholmóg, finishing things off with our fantastic open day. It's been a really great day, lots of people down to find out a bit about the site. There's been a bit of blacksmithing going on from the guys from Moneypenny's Blacksmith Workshop, who've been doing a bit of medieval sort of crafts. We'll have Mario sort of showing off some of the artefacts which have been found from the site, and Johnny as well showing other artefacts that the great archaeologists at the Northern Archaeological Consultancy have found from other sites right across the province. And we also have Fionnuala, and I have to say a big thank you to Fionnuala as well for allowing us to come on to her land again for this community dig, and also for demonstrating her skill, her pottery skill. She's been doing a number of pottery workshops and allowing some of her visitors today to produce and take away their own pots. Rosemary's she's been doing a wee bit of living history for us today, again just giving us an idea of life back in medieval times when this site dates from. It's a wee bit sad. This is the end of what's been a great 3 weeks here at Kilmocholmóg, and what is our third community archaeological dig. We've been delighted to welcome over 450 volunteers over the 3 weeks. They've helped us to confirm that this is indeed a church site, as the name suggests, Church of My Little Colman. I really just want to say a huge thank you to every single person who came to help us reach this conclusion. Also to say a massive thank you to the National Lottery Heritage Fund for the confidence and trust that they've shown in us. This is the third project which they have funded, and we really couldn't have done it without their funding, so thank you very much to them and to all those lottery players whose money contributes to the Heritage Fund. There's a lot more to be found here. You know, we certainly have an early medieval site, but we also have what looks to be an earlier Neolithic and Bronze Age site. So it'll be great to come back here, so we'll see what happens in the future. But you can keep up to date with all of our latest events by looking at our website, creatinhistoricalsociety.org.uk, or by keeping track of us on Facebook. We're looking forward to the final results of the excavation being unveiled at a talk later on in the year, and there will also be a booklet cataloguing all 3 excavations, which will be launched at that event. So do keep an eye out on our Facebook and website for further details. So just want to say a huge thank you to all the volunteers who have come and helped us to excavate this site. We really couldn't have done it without you. Directed by the fantastic team of the Northern Archaeological Consultancy, led by Katie. Great group of people to work with, shared their knowledge. A lot of fun as well has been had on site. Thank you also to Dr. Alistair Ruffell and Ram Montgomery at Queen's University for all of the drone and survey work, as well as Emal and his team at the Ulster Archaeological Society for the receptivity work that they have been doing. It's just been a real team effort and a real group effort which have helped us to finally confirm that this is an early Christian site, which is what we set out to do 3 years ago.